Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The True Purpose of Vines by Giovanna Siniscalchi, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Oporto, Portugal, June 1870. A gust of wind blew in from the sea. Members flocked inside the British factory house, holding their top hats and flapping coats. They lived outside the motherland, but could still enjoy a gentleman's club as luxurious as White's in London. Griffin left his hat and coat in the vestibule and entered the foyer. Light from two horse-sized chandeliers flashed on the arched ceiling. Voices and clinking glasses mingled with the pianist, playing a sonata in the corner. All the British port-trading gentlemen were here. Some stood near the tall colonnades, while others talked in groups, their black and white finery stark against the blue walls. Friends, passing acquaintances, competitors, all would give their left foot to be in Griffin's position. After courting Croft for a year, he would extract a yes from the wily fox. Nothing could go wrong. Their partnership was a fait accompli. Griffin's pulse hammered a staccato rhythm on the veins of his neck. He rolled his shoulders to release the tension as he scanned the crowd. Coat straining over his stomach, Croft chatted with Fladgate and Taylor. He looked like a benevolent sea lion with the points of his mustache curving down like ivory tusks. His appearance masked his ruthlessness in business. The man knew the value of things, be it wine, horses, or properties, and could bargain a fellow out of his trousers and sell it back to him for double the price. They made eye contact, and Croft waved. Waiting to speak with him until after lunch would be as pleasant as shaving himself with a barbed wire. Griffin wrestled a place on the leather couch and hoisted the Times, scanning the London news. He usually enjoyed the newspaper, but as it arrived in Oporto only once a week, but today the headlines blurred. Failure crept into his thoughts, listing everything that could go wrong. Griffin shut his eyes, dispelling the unusual pessimism. Croft neared retirement. With no sons to assume his business, he had reason to value a partnership. The upholstery dipped. You know what would be grand? If my dear friend lent me the phaeton and his flashy team tomorrow. Griffin lowered the paper a few inches and raised a brow. Charles Whitaker eyed him expectantly, his hair in disarray, sporting a bright yellow vest that clashed with his striped trousers. No doubt he had sailed from a night of debauchery straight into the factory house. Griffin lowered the paper. Another race? After last time? No, not that. Your blacks put to shame any horseflesh in Oporto, and I mean to impress. The Baronesa's husband will kill you if the races won't. Charles's affair had ended in a very public and embarrassing duel. Griffin abhorred expressions of passionate liaisons, be it drunken serenades or pistols at dawn. His mistresses needed to be desirable but discreet. Let the Portuguese rant and rave about love. His life would never be ruled by such animal instincts. Charles extracted a cigar from his pocket. This isn't about Carmen. I promised Anita an outing to Sintra. You know her, the ballet dancer. Come with me tonight. He brightened. She has this blonde roommate that does a marvelous rond de jambe. He licked his lips as if he meant a dessert and not a dance step. Griffin grimaced at the alcohol fumes his friend exhaled, strong enough to burn his nose. I'm taking Anne to the opera. His little sister had pestered him all week to see the reopening of Nabucco. The brat had a way of sweet-talking him into doing her bidding. Why don't you try a respectable outing for a change? You may even like it. You sound like my father, but I must warn you I have a hell of a time understanding his speeches when I'm soused. Charles perked up and spoke in a plummy imitation of Mr. Whitaker the senior. What a man does in private, he repents in private, but what he does in public, he regrets in his privates. Griffin hid his laughter under a stern facade. A little decorum, for heaven's sake. This is the factory house, not some shady tavern. The two gentlemen across from them glowered, whispering behind their hands as they moved to the whist table. Charles narrowed his eyes. The devil-may-care attitude seeped from his features to reveal an unusually thoughtful expression. You are just like them, are you not? The best sportsman of Porto, A really capital fellow locked in this paddock like sheep. He gave the company of gentlemen a contemptuous look. There is a whole of Portugal you ignore, waiting beyond these walls. Not caring for Charles's unflinching stare, Griffin crossed his arms, forcing a blank expression. If he had embraced Portuguese temptations, he wouldn't have transformed his uncle's small trading firm into the fastest-growing port company in the city. I'm taking the coach to the countryside tomorrow. Charles gaped, the unlicked cigar slipping from his lips. You? Leaving town? Griffin shrugged. A few weeks. I'm going to the high Douro. My late uncle's quinta is leaking more money than a drain pipe, and I will set it to rights. You know there are no English people up there, don't you? The Douro River was Portuguese territory, home to the quintas that produced port wine. It was a wild, unruly corner of the world that held no interest for Griffin. Still, the business required his attention. I'm perfectly aware the Queen won't be there to greet me. Will you sell the place? I don't know yet. The bell sounded, and Charles staggered to his feet. It will do you good to spend some time outside this paddock. Griffin watched him swagger to the dining room. Had Griffin ever been carefree like Charles? Of course not. His mother and sister had been under his care since he was 17 years old. If this partnership went well, no, not if, but when, he would restore his family to the former status they'd had in London. The hours dragged by as Griffin endured lunch and stilted conversation. His watch pulsed inside his pocket as if counting the seconds until he could speak with Croft, a countdown to his future. On a sidebar, servers lined up port decanters. Croft grabbed a bottle, chest puffed. I raided the cellar for this gem. I dare you to guess the year and the producer. Members applauded while the footman distributed chalices. Griffin ignored the bets. When his glass arrived, he took it by the stem and twirled the amber liquid. Why this fuss? There was good wine and bad wine. Obsessing about terroir, vintage, and bouquet fell in the same category of Portuguese romantic notions he avoided. When Croft declared the winner, Griffin didn't raise his eyes. Finally, members left in pairs and trios, some unsteady on their legs. Griffin strode inside the treasurer's office, taking in the battle paintings, the stale tobacco smell, and the tray filled with port and whiskey decanters. The anxiety that had plagued him all day left in waves, leaving in its place the cold-headed focus that guided him in daily life. Croft sank behind his Georgian desk and invited Griffin to sit. Great lunch, Griffin said, wondering how much small talk was needed before he could speak about the partnership. Glad you enjoyed it, Maxwell. Croft lit a cigar and puffed a steady stream of smoke. Do you know a wine property named Quinta do Vesuvio? If he'd never heard about the best wine producer in the Douro, he wouldn't have a long life in this business. Griffin pulled the flap of his coat to sit. I believe they neighbor my uncle's plantation. 2 years ago, I lent money to Mr. Bernardo Ferreira so he could increase wine production, but the man died, and I'm worried. You want me to see if they complied? I would consider it a great favor. Slightly out of breath, Croft flattened a yellowed map over the desk. Vesuvio stood to the Douro River's right side, closer to Griffin's property than he had expected. These are the current plantings. Call it an old man's intuition, but I think they hide something there, and it's not codfish. Griffin pocketed the map, dismissing Croft's fears. In his few dealings with the Portuguese, he found them to be many things, but not dishonest. I will let you know. I've sent Mrs. Costa a letter. I told her it would be a personal favor to me if her estate manager gave you guidance in winemaking. Griffin needed no help from this widow. How hard could it be to make a quinta profitable? If the Portuguese could do it, so could the English, with better results. A few weeks in the countryside would be enough to succeed in this now dual task, check if Vesuvio had increased production, and make his property thrive. Croft stood and faced his battle painting, cigarette smoke cascading from his mouth. We won Portugal back to them. I was a lad, but my father helped Wellington's forces scourge the frogs out of Oporto. If Croft started talking about Napoleon's peninsular battles, Griffin would never hear the end of it. It was time. Griffin rose and moved behind the chair. I examined your firm's client list. If you agree with the partnership, the overlap will be small. Your clients are based in London, while mine are spread over Scotland, New York, and Russia. Together, we'll have a major market share. Heart pounding in his ears, he counted the rise and fall of the older man's chest. 1, 2, 3. I don't want you as a partner, Croft said, staring at the redcoats. Griffin gripped the back of the chair, his stomach lurching, as if he was inside the clipper again. Croft knew. A vision flashed of his family's retreat to Oporto 12 years ago. The cramped third-class cabin, his sister's gray pallor, his mother's constant weeping. Croft turned, his skin flushed, and laid a chilly hand on Griffin's shoulder. I want you as a son. Griffin sucked in a breath, thoughts scattering like pickpockets after a police raid. Speech deserted him, and he focused on Croft's red-rimmed eyes. Cheer, boy, cheer. You look as if you saw a ghost. I'm not getting any younger, you know. Croft chuckled, exposing yellowed teeth. I fear for my business, but also for Beth's security. Griffin staggered away. What a wallop in the gut. Had he heard correctly? Could he be proposing marriage? Your daughter wants this? What is there not to want? Croft followed him around the room like an insistent salesman. She is probably in love with you already. Half the girls here are. Anyway, she is a dutiful English lady. He extinguished the cigar in the crystal ashtray. Go fix Quinta de Boa Vista. When you come back, we will sign the papers. Griffin's leather soles echoed over the long warehouse's cement floor. His lodge at Gaia's wharf housed port wine barrels from low in the ground to the high-beamed ceiling. He traced the letters written in chalk. The next delivery was destined for Petersburg residence of Vladimir Pavlovich, Grand Duke, one of the new markets Griffin had opened last year. Exhaling, he plodded to his office. The curtainless window invited the brackish fishery odor from the river. The boiling mass of water churned below. After a squall, the Douro turned unpredictable, as the giant oak floating in the depths could testify. Griffin shut his eyes, fisting his hands on the windowsill. After this partnership, no one could ever uproot his family again. His mother and sister would be sought after in Oporto's British community, no scandals hovering over their prospects like clouds before a storm. They could shove the past behind them, his father's bankruptcy in London, the risk of debtor's prison, and losing every single asset they owned. But marriage? He did not expect the partnership to come with those strings attached. Cunning old Croft had gotten the upper hand after all. Griffin envisioned the girl's youthful face, cornflower blue eyes, and blonde ringlets. Elizabeth Croft was 18 at most. The thought made him feel ancient, but he must marry at some point. He was 31. The girl would make a good wife, dutiful, proper. A man could do much worse. Sir, you wanted to see me? Edmund, his secretary, placed a ledger atop his desk. The fresh-faced lad from Liverpool had been living in Oporto only 2 years, but he'd proved to be an exceedingly competent in the short period. Have you studied the new purchases arriving on today's steamboat? Of course. Griffin grunted. Wine deliveries are booked until the year's end. I will deal with vintage acquisitions when I come back. He stared at the boy. Anything amiss, and I mean anything, you know where to find me. If it's urgent, I will telegraph the Concello at Villa Nova. Otherwise, I will send you weekly reports by mail coach. Edmund sported his most confident grin, no doubt anxious to test his corporate muscles. I have everything under control. You can travel with ease. Nodding once, twice, Griffin strode to the door. On the way out, he halted in front of the framed newspaper decorating the otherwise bare wall, an index of the largest port traders. In 1869, Maxwell Company had made it to the prestigious 10. Next year we will be in the first place, Edmund. The frame leaned to the left, and Griffin adjusted it. Mark my words. I don't need a new house. This one is perfect for our needs. Soon, Anne will marry, and it will be just an enormous empty house. Griffin's mother served herself a sherry and sat behind the piano. Nonsense. It's the best in Oporto, and you deserve the best. Griffin clutched the stem of his glass with more force than necessary. He faulted the excessive colors for his temper. Flowery wallpaper wrapped the parlor, the design enough to give any man a migraine. A rug imported from the Orient completed the elaborate decoration, and so many knickknacks poised above every surface that he had trouble finding a landing place for his glass. The walls, though, sported only 2 paintings, both Faustino's landscapes, which Griffin had purchased here in Oporto. Their former house in Repton had hundreds of portraits by local painters and renowned artists, including a square William Fowler, his mother's pride and joy. She and father had taken great delight in them, but not here. This house could fit inside their former family estate. "If you added some grandchildren, it would not be so lonely," his mother said, spearing him with a hopeful glance. Griffin paced to the window. The wind had stopped, and the street was filled with couples taking a night stroll, the gas lamps casting round yellow pools on the paved sidewalk. "You'll have your wishes granted, after all." He turned and held her gaze. "Croft offered a marriage between our families." "Marriage?" She furrowed her brow. Her blue eyes were a softer shade than his, but sharp as a needle. "You can't mean little Beth." He shrugged, his jaws locking against his will. "Beth is his only child." "But she is exactly that, a child. You need a woman, one who puts you in your place from time to time. What the family needs is this partnership." His voice sounded harsher than intended, and he forced a leash around his anger. Why must he be the only person in this family who worried about their future? She flinched, raising her palms. "All I want is your happiness. I assure you that as soon as I get back from the Douro, I don't mean money." She touched his face with her soft, chilly hands. Griffin looked into her eyes, the emotions brimming there, unsure what she expected from him. He patted her slim shoulder blade, but she continued to stare. Anne floated down the stairs in a cloud of blue silk, white blonde hair shimmering in the candlelight. "About time," Griffin grunted, thankful for the timely interruption. Anne gave him a pretty mew. "Must you always frown so?" "I never frown." "Stop teasing your brother. We will be late." Anne shrugged a dainty shoulder and blew him a kiss. "But it's always so fun to tease him. Griffin doesn't know what the word means." Griffin gave the girl a warning look and closed his cufflinks. She grinned. "Can we go, then? I've waited the entire week for the reopening of Nabucco, the tragic tale of love and loss." "Imagine that." He rolled his eyes. To live in Portugal was to be besieged by sentimental music. The natives would hear only Italian opera and sing only love songs. She sighed dramatically. "Must you be so in Seville, Griff?" Narrowing his eyes, Griffin ushered the ladies to the front door. His sister was too peninsular, mixing Portuguese words with English, caring too much for her local friendships, not to mention her irrational romantic ideas. It was his fault. If he had prevented them from moving to Portugal, she would be a proper English lady. When he returned from the Douro, he would send her to a finishing school. A British one.